It's time to finally talk about the Cosmere. Hello everyone, I'm Just Some Reader, and welcome to One Man's Book Trash, where I dive into what people don't want to find some real treasure. Today, we're going to be talking about The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, the third and final book in the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy. So the way I acquired this book. This is a secondhand book, but I did not acquire it at a thrift store. I was actually at an alumni event for one of my college clubs where I was playing a bunch of board games, and I saw that there was a bin full of free stuff. And there this was. I believe the first two books were also there, but I already owned them, so I just took the third book. It just goes to show the many ways you can get your hands on a book without just going to a bookstore like Barnes & Noble. You can go to a thrift store, hit up some garage sales, or just find random books lying around on a college campus. The world is your oyster! Now, normally this would be the time where I start talking about the author, but this is Brandon Sanderson. I think Brandon Sanderson might be one of the most prolific, if not the most prolific fantasy authors of the modern day, especially among mainstream fantasy fans. Your average person will probably know about The Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Game of Thrones because they're hugely popular adaptations. They might also know vaguely about things like Earthsea, Aragon, and The Wheel of Time. But once someone really wants to start getting into the fantasy genre, either going to a bookstore and looking at the fantasy titles or looking stuff up on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc., they're eventually going to run into Brandon Sanderson. If you don't know Brandon Sanderson, here's a very quick rundown. He's a fantasy author from Utah known for writing a lot, and I mean a lot. He's probably written over like 40 books since his career started in the early 2000s. Originally a biochemistry major at BYU, he changed to English after an LDS mission trip to South Korea, and he wrote 12 books before his first novel, Elend, was picked up for publication. Most of his books take place within their own shared, interconnected universe called the Cosmere. It's like the MCU before the MCU was a thing. So from what I understand, all books within the Cosmere share the same like mechanics with their magic and may cross over with each other, if ever so slightly. Like, this magic may have to deal with wind, this magic deals with metal, this magic deals with drawing stuff, but it all operates on the same basic fundamentals. But what exactly is the Hero of Ages? Let's jump into it. Like I said before, this is the third and final book in the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy. This Mistborn trilogy is great. It's in a setting where ash is constantly falling from the sky and mist covers the land, where the nobility mistreat the serf class in an empire ruled by a god. The first book, Mistborn, originally titled The Final Empire, now just referred to as Mistborn, The Final Empire, is by Brandon's own admission a sort of heist novel. It's like Ocean's 11 meets My Fair Lady. A crew of thieves is assembled, each with their own unique magical powers, to steal from the Lord Ruler, the God King of this land that rules it with an iron fist. And what they're going to steal is the Empire itself. The main character, Vin, has to learn her new powers as a Mistborn and also infiltrate noble parties. The second book, The Well of Ascension, spoilers, explores the fallout after the crew's successful defeat of the Lord Ruler, with various warring factions popping up and seizing control of different parts of the broken empire. I talk about it a little more in my winter ranking video. Since I'm reviewing a third book in a trilogy, there are going to be spoilers abound for the previous two books in the series, so watch at your own risk. The Hero of Ages starts a year after the Well of Ascension. Things are just getting worse. Ever since Vin accidentally let loose a rogue god named Ruin into the world in the Well of Ascension, the world just has ash falling even harder from the sky, and there are constant earthquakes. It's some real end of time stuff. So Vin, Elend, Sazed, and the entire gang have to figure out a way to defeat Ruin, all the while trying to save as many people from the literal apocalypse as they can. First things first, we're not going to talk about story or characters or even the magic system. No. We're going to talk about everything else first. So let's look at the cover. Immediately, this is very different from the modern covers I've seen for the Hero of Ages. This is really giving early aughts fantasy book. I'll be honest, I got the sense that this was Vin, but I didn't realize that this was Elend. Like, That's what he looks like? I wasn't expecting such like a chiseled jawline. He looks more like Peter Dinklage than anyone else. But once you start reading and see what they're wearing, I guess, Elend wears white. that has to be Elend, I guess. Anyway, the next thing that's different are the symbols. In the first two books, the title page and stuff use the symbols that they use for Allomancy. But this book throws all of that out in exchange for these inky whorls. If you can see the inky whorls right all around there. It seems, based on the wiki that I very carefully waded through to not get any spoilers for other Cosmere books, that these are actually ancient Terrace symbols. I don't really know how that's relevant. I guess it's a little relevant because of like the importance of the Terrace religion in this book. Maybe. What's interesting to me is the actual look of the symbols. They're reminiscent of the tendrils of mist that are ever present throughout the entire trilogy, and also the smoke that Ruin is associated with. It's a great way to immediately shift the tone from the previous two books to this one. Now let's talk about the Ars Arcanum. It's a bit of reference material that Mr. Sanderson likes to put at the back of his books. For one thing, there's an entire glossary of terms that wasn't in the previous two books. The previous books only had information on the magic systems within the book, like what happens when you burn iron, etc., etc. It was really helpful to understand the magic. But this book has a glossary of everything. People, places, terms, what have you. It's all in here. But it's not just those. There's some silly jokes in here as well. We've got Hoid as a mystery yet to be solved, which is pretty fun. Hoid is a recurring character in the Cosmere. He's kind of like the Stan Lee in an MCU movie, like, oh, that's the guy I know. I still don't really know what his deal is, but unlike Stan Lee, he has to be relevant for the Cosmere as a whole at some point. He's a little bit of a meddler and a storyteller. That's why I was so confused when the character Slowswift was described as the nickname of a certain nobleman in Fadrex. He bears a striking resemblance to a well-known storyteller. For a second I thought it was Hoid, but Hoid was actually a beggar that Vin specifically chose not to meet in Fadrex City. But apparently Slowswift is a reference to J.R.R. Tolkien, so that's kind of funny. Like, that's a funny little cameo. That's some Stan Lee bullshit right there, Mr. Sanderson. There's an entry for Mistborn Llamas, Brandon's former writing group who helped and advised on all three Mistborn books. Mistborn Llamas chew various kinds of plants to gain super llaman powers. T-shirts can be found on the website, if you know where to look. Now that's how you do an in-joke. Hell yeah! Another interesting thing about the Ars Arcanum this time around are the summaries of the previous two books. This is something I haven't really encountered before in any book. This book came out in 2008, so I imagine this would have been nice when it released. I also think it's funny that if someone didn't read the first two books, they could just skip them. Like, read the summaries in the back of this book and just call it a day. I don't know why they would do that, but you could if you really wanted to. Here's a hot take though. It's about the metal chart. Specifically the graphic they use for the allomantic metals. I get that the internal metals are on the inside circle and the external metals are on the outside circle. Like, that makes sense, I suppose, but it ticks me off. Like, there are 4 groups of metals, right? And they're all different. But in my mind, the internal-external thing just isn't the first thing that comes to mind when I think about relationships between metals within the magic system. That push and pull, basically Newton's third law, is so integral to the book and its themes that I think about the metals more as iron and steel rather than iron, steel, and tin pewter, you know? I think it'd make more sense if the pulling metals, like iron and tin, were on the inside circle, and then the pushing metals, like steel and pewter, are in the same pie slice on the outside circle as their pair. So you got in the same pie slice iron and steel, and then tin and pewter, etc. throughout the whole chart. But no, it's just in the same circle. They're we're pushing here and pulling this way. Like, Brando, why can't we pull inwards, push outwards from... It's a circle. It's a circle. But what do I know? It's your book, I guess, Bowser Sowser. Okay, now let's actually start talking about the book. Here's another hot take. Perhaps a scalding one, I don't know. And I think The Well of Ascension is a better book than The Hero of Ages. If you've seen my winter ranking video, you'll know that I think The Well of Ascension is perfectly paced. It knows exactly what it's doing. It's a story about a siege, that careful politicking at play. It's so claustrophobic, and it only gets more claustrophobic as more enemies arrive outside Luthadel city walls, and then it all builds up until it boils over with the inevitable fighting that occurs, and then Vin's descent into the actual Well of Ascension itself at the end of the book. The Hero of Ages, on the other hand, feels like it doesn't know what it wants to do until like page 500. It sort of just meanders between things until we actually get an end goal. Now, there are a lot of specific standout moments within the Hero of Ages that I like a lot more than in the Well of Ascension, but the things that tie all those specific points together and connects them all just aren't as engrossing as the Well of Ascension's plot. We basically just know, oh boy, Ruin's up to something. Why don't we just go ahead and run around getting the Lord Ruler's caches he's left behind here? Because we don't know what the hell else we're supposed to do. And once we figure out what's in all those caches, the plot just kind of falls into free fall for like 100 pages. That connective tissue just isn't really there, unlike the Well of Ascension, where we have very clear goals as to where we need to go. Like, we need to try and survive and win this siege, and we need to figure out the prophecies and find out where the heck the Well of Ascension actually is. In the Hero of Ages, we kind of have an overarching goal in we need to defeat Ruin. But taking a page out of Mr. Sanderson's own writing lectures, it feels like they don't make any progress towards the promise of vaguely defeat Ruin until Ruin himself makes a physical appearance to Vin later in the book, which is around page 500. Before that, Ruin's kind of just like an amorphous being that's around that they have to defeat somehow. It's like, we need to defeat air. Like, how do you defeat air? The Hero of Ages is still an amazing read, don't get me wrong, but I just think the Well of Ascension is simply better crafted plot-wise and just a tighter narrative all around. Now let's talk about the magic within the Hero of Ages. Brandon Sanderson is perhaps the king of the modern fantasy hard magic system. A kind of magic that has rules that are as easily to understand for the reader as when you pull the trigger of a gun, it shoots something. You know that when X happens, Y will happen. This is clear in Allomancy. When you burn a specific metal that you've ingested into your body, you basically get a specific effect. Like when a character burns pewter, I know they're going to be physically stronger and be able to ignore wounds that they normally couldn't or heal them much faster. Now in the Well of Ascension, the addition of the metal duralumin that allows the user to enhance a specific kind of metal that they burn was a more than excellent addition to the already excellent magic system that is Allomancy. It literally improves on the base established that the reader already knows if they read the first book. It just makes it stronger. It's sick. That same metal is also present within the Hero of Ages. The Hero of Ages doesn't really introduce anything new to the system that is Allomancy. There is a new metal called Electrum that's sort of a cheap alternative to counter Atium, which Atium allows the user to see other people's futures, while Electrum, you're able to see your own future, so it kind of messes with it in a way. That, however, simply isn't as interesting as Duralumin at all, and it barely gets used within the book. Like, I feel like it's only used in the opening fight scene chapter. If it really does, I don't remember. I know they used Electrum in the book. I just can't remember when they did. But we do get to expand more on the use of Allomancy itself. One of these is Elend, who has become a Mistborn because of events that happened at the end of the Well of Ascension. But Elend's powers as a Mistborn are a bit different than Vin's. His power is just simply stronger than normal, and compared to the Mistborns of old, and they're able to do things such as burn brass to soothe multiple people at once instead of just one person. But at the same time, Elend is nowhere near as strong as Vin because of simple training and experience, and Vin just has like a specific like know-how about Allomancy. Like, it comes really naturally to her. Like, Vin is able to do this trick with iron and steel that she's able to like move really quickly by pushing and pulling on horseshoes, while Elend just can't really wrap his mind around that and do it as perfectly as Vin. It's an interesting dynamic that I really like. We also get a deeper look at Mistings, who are only able to burn one kind of metal, and in this case we're able to look at Spook, who is able to burn tin. Burning tin allows one to sense things better, like have better eyesight, feel things much better, smell different smells. Spook's constant overuse and flaring of tin makes his senses even stronger than the normal person, or even a regular Misting who can use tin, because he's just pushing past his limits. This is to the point where nighttime looks like day to him, and during the day it's so bright outside that he has to wear a very thick blindfold for it to even be bearable. The blindfold itself is a great visual, but the use of tin in this way and the magic system is really cool for this late in the series. The real highlight of this book, however, is Hemalurgy. I suppose it's the only real through line throughout the first bit of this book, trying to understand Hemalurgy and, by extension, the power of ruin. This is probably my favorite part of those first 500 pages. It's so well thought out, and Sanderson lays out just enough that you're able to figure out what's going on before it's just outright revealed. Like I did. It was so fun to do. Hemalurgy is all about stealing power from other people, and to do so, you have to kill them. You have to kill them with a piece of metal. Usually a large spike of some kind of metal, but really any bit of metal will do. This is how the Inquisitors of the series were created, by driving different spikes through people and killing them into different parts of the Inquisitor's body to basically give them the powers of Mistborn, even though they weren't Mistborn to begin with. But they can also steal different abilities, like normal human abilities, like strength or something, or stuff like ferrochemical abilities, like being able to make themselves bigger and stronger and store stuff, like Sazed does. It's later revealed that the same is true of the making of the Koloss and Kandra, who are made with hemalurgic spikes. Side note, whenever I picture the Inquisitors, I know they have like two spikes in their eye sockets, but for some reason I just picture Maharaga or Hanami from JJK. Like, I know they're not supposed to look like that, but whenever Vin's fighting an Inquisitor, I just think she's going up against like a Hanami type character. Maybe it's because of the eye stalks. Anyway, using Hemalurgy still has a kind of drawback to it, and I'd like to compare it to using the One Ring from the Lord of the Rings. Like, putting on the One Ring may make you invisible, but it also draws Sauron's eye to you. And similarly, when you have a hemalurgic spike, you're susceptible to Ruin's influence. So the more spikes you have, the more you can actually just straight up be controlled by Ruin like a puppet. It's a cool drawback, and it has incredible ramifications on the individual character interactions and conflicts within the book. So when Spook gets access to pewter, you start to think, how did he actually get that? I was able to deduce for myself that when Spook got into a fight around, I think it was chapter 13 or so, the sword that was stabbed through the pewter arm Allomancer straight into Spook inadvertently got used as a spike, steal the Allomancer's power and transfer it to Spook through the spike. And once that happened, Spook saw Ruin in the form of Kelsier. Or huge big spoilers, it skipped a plot if you don't want to hear this bit, just use the YouTube chapters. With Vin's earring, Ruin was able to influence her ever so slightly by having her brother Reen, her brother Reen, speak to her in her mind. It was a sick reveal, because I always thought, what was the deal with this voice in this girl's head? And also, Sanderson just kept drawing attention to Vin's mother's earring like it was important, and also the fact that Vin's mother killed Vin's baby sister. Oh my god! And that's how she was able to pierce copper clouds. Now let's get into the plot of this book. Like I said before, the book feels like it sort of meanders until the last 200 pages or so. It's fun meandering, but it's meandering nonetheless. It's more character driven, which is what makes it fun. What they do before that last section is basically hop between Fadrex and Urto and see what the characters are doing there, while we intersperse it with moments from Tensoon the Kandra and Marsh, Kelsier's Inquisitor brother. But also, whenever we cut to Tensoon, it feels like, oh my god, is he still in the Kandra homeland? Ugh. When is this guy gonna leave? Like, we get chapters of, oh, I'm being hurt. And another chapter of, oh, I'm still being hurt. And another chapter of, oh, I'm on trial for my crimes. Like, oh, just escape already, bro. Just escape. Just tell, you have something to tell Vin. It's like Brandon Sanderson wanted Tensoon to show up at a very specific point. So he just kind of like, oh, remember Tensoon? He's still here. He's still trapped. Oh, you really want him to escape, huh? He's still gonna stay here for like 400 pages. But let's go over the Urto section of the book. This is mainly focused on Spook and Sazed. On the one hand, we have Spook trying to start a rebellion against the Ska leader there that is kind of oppressing his people a lot. And on the other hand, we have Sazed, who is super depressed after his death in the previous book. Little spoilers there, but whatever. And he's looking for meaning in the religions he studied before and searching for the truth. The actual plot of the Urto bit is kind of whatever, but the character development of Spook and Sazed are pretty great. Especially Sazed, who is my favorite character in the entire trilogy, and I'll get to him later. Oh boy. But I don't really care about Spook's romance subplot with Beldre, like, at all. Also, the whole plot to unseat Quellion the Citizen, the Ska leader I mentioned earlier, from power, kind of just feels like they're using Dern and Breeze to speedrun the first Mistborn book. They even say multiple times, like, we got rid of the Lord Ruler. We can do it again. Like, okay, bro, I get it. I guess it happens. I did really like how Spook's actual character developed from just lookout boy in the previous two books to dependable man. And also saving the city by running through a burning building by making the most use out of his overdrawn tin by extinguishing it all so he can basically feel nothing as he's running through a burning building. Like, ooh, Brandon Sando, that's a good use of the magic system. Ooh. And it also gives extra credence to the survivor of the flame moniker he gets among the people in Urto. But up until then, the time in Urto is just kind of whatever. I do really like the idea behind Urto that Brando put into it, with the stopped canals that used to run through the city like Venice, for them only to be like these dry ass gutters with maybe a little muddy bottom where people just walk through them like regular roads with the houses on top where they used to be. That's sick as hell, Brando. That's pretty sick. Now, the Fadrex City section is a bit more interesting because we're hanging out with Vin and Elend. They're trying to secure the last of the Lord Ruler's supply caches and are in a kind of a reverse well of Ascension where they're on the aggression side of a siege and they're trying to get into a city. They're the ones with the armies of Koloss outside the city. Fadrex is an interesting thematic foil to Urto in the binary of the two gods of Mistborn, preservation and ruin. I'm gonna have to read my notes for this one, I think. While Urto is the ruin side, whose government has dismantled the previous one for a city that kills anyone with noble blood, Fadrex is the preservation side, where the city is run by an obligator that still believes in the Lord Ruler, while its nobles are still going to balls and hosting them. One is built on destruction, the other is built on stability. It's here in Fadrex City where we get perhaps my favorite scene within the entirety of the Hero of Ages, and that's Elend and Vin attending a ball together. For one thing, it's the ballsiest move they've pulled in the entire trilogy. They're pulling up to a ball they weren't invited to in a city they're currently sieging. But also the interactions between the romantic leads and the other people at the ball are they're just great. The best way I can describe it with my hip lingo is that they're aura farming the entire time. Like, from the moment they enter, they're aura farming. When they're talking to the guests, they're aura farming, especially Vin. Like, Vin talks to the other women at the ball and says, oh, we've got an army outside, and oh, Alario? Oh, I think I killed your cousin. Like, oh my god, this woman, the amount of aura she has. Elend's discussions with his old friend Teldin, and also finding out that he actually has respect for Yeoman, and they feel like a kindred soul about, you know, they both read politics and political theory. Those were some great scenes. And finally, Vin and Elend's dance. Oh my god, the dance. I loved it. It was great. The ball really allowed them to relive their past for a moment and really get a sense of, oh, what could have been if the world wasn't going to shit right now. Elend pulling out the book during the dance he and Vin are having is just, it's just priceless. This goober, man. Look at this goober right here. This little goober here. Also, the duality comes back again with Elend wearing white and Vin wearing black, the colors of preservation and ruin respectively, as mentioned in the epigraph of chapter 31. Speaking of epigraphs, let's talk about them for a moment before we get into the last bit of the book, where we will have a lot of spoilers. Now, the epigraphs are these little tidbits of information in italics at the beginning of each chapter. Sanderson usually uses them, in this Mistborn trilogy at least, as excerpts from an in-universe document that's spread out throughout the entire book. In Book 1, we have Elendi's logbook, the previous Hero of Ages. In Book 2, we had a steel plate written by a terraceman named Quan, who had actually found Elendi and proclaimed him to be the Hero of Ages all those years ago, and is writing about how he regretted it. Those two were lore tidbits, but they're really just little nuggets of information sprinkled throughout the book that talk about an outside narrative. In this book, it's like straight up exposition dumping. In the Hero of Ages, Sanderson uses it as a way to explain certain things about the magic and world that he can't really explain within the plot of the novel itself. So the epigraphs serve as a kind of backbone for you to understand what exactly is going on in the book, like what's happening, and it gives it a backbone to explain things with. This is what allowed me to figure out what was going on with our characters with those hemalurgic spikes. A few chapters after Spook saw Kelsier, there was a epigraph talking about hemalurgic spikes and what they're able to do, and combine that with what they're able to do at the end of the Ars Arcanum, you know, what spikes do what, I was able to deduce what exactly happened to our boy Spook. And also, you know, with the first scene in the prologue where Marsh is literally like killing someone with a spike. It does make sense why these epigraphs are so long and lore dumpy because of who's writing them, but they're also kind of a little too long. Like, the epilogue has an epigraph that takes up an entire page and then some. I still like the epigraph. I really like that epigraph, but goddamn, it was long. But this in-universe text, and the first epigraph, is, I am, unfortunately, the Hero of Ages. The famous line everyone says, you know, on the TikToks and the Instagrams. Now let's get into the real meat and potatoes of who that is and the final part of this book. This is like the last 200 pages, alright? So if you don't want the biggest spoilers for the book's ending, skip ahead, probably to the verdict? Maybe you can probably watch the bit on the weird dialogue, but probably just skip to the verdict. Use the YouTube chapters. So you're still here? Let's get into it, shall we? So the whole book before this point, the Khandra Tensoon has been dealing with the fallout from the crimes he'd committed in the Well of Ascension, you know, attacking his master. But he was finally able to escape the Khandra homeland and go to Urto looking for Vin. And while Tensoon isn't able to find Vin in Urto, he is able to find Sazed, who upon meeting the Khandra is able to realize that apparently the first generation of Khandra are actually the Lord Ruler's companions that went with him to the Well of Ascension and actually follow the original terrorist religion, the lost terrorist religion. So Sazed has to get to the Khandras and figure all this shit out. Meanwhile, Vin and Elend are still dealing with Fadrex. Vin had been taken prisoner after trying to sneak into the last cache inside of Fadrex City, which had no notes on how to deal with Ruin inside it. The Lord Ruler kind of just, he like literally didn't know what to do. He was just making shit up, I guess. But then there's a whole standoff when Vin is brought to see Yeoman and the Inquisitor Marsh appears. And Vin is able to like hallucinate Ruin's presence. But she also tricks Ruin by saying where the Lord Ruler's ATM stash is, which is the thing Ruin is actually searching for. Like, okay, we've got something now. We gotta find the Lord Ruler's ATM stash and keep it away from Ruin. We've got a goal! Ah! But then Ruin takes control of Elend's Koloss army and marches it on Fadrex City. Elend's men then retreat into Fadrex City and make a sort of alliance with Yeoman because there's a bunch of Koloss out here. Let's just let's just buddy up, man. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And then we finally get an answer to something that happened at the end of the first Mistborn book. How the hell did Vin burn the mist? Vin goes off on her own towards Luthadel to draw out Ruin's Inquisitors, which is like 13 Inquisitors plus Marsh. She does so because she thinks she can only draw upon the mist in her time of need. Like when she's in real dire need. So it turns out the mist is actually like the god Preservation's body, and Vin's earring is actually a tiny hemalurgic spike. And that was the reason Vin was able to pierce copper clouds this whole time, because her mother killed her baby sister who was a seeker. And with the spike, Vin was able to just amplify her own Mistborn powers. Sometimes the mist would reject Vin, like sometimes in the Well of Ascension and in this book. And that was because she had a hemalurgic spike in her ear, and that hemalurgic spike is of Ruin, so of course Preservation is gonna get away from it. So Vin fights the Inquisitors in Luthadel and gets her shit absolutely rocked. Ruin's like, I'm gonna kill you. And then Marsh uses his final bit of free will to rip the earring from Vin's ear, and therefore get rid of Ruin's presence on her and allow her to actually burn the mists. Now remember when I talked about aura farming earlier? This is one of those moments of hype and aura, because the fight somehow turns into like a Dragon Ball fight. It's like Vin is going Super Saiyan here, and all this power is flowing into her because she's able to burn the mist like metal. And when I say flowing into her, I mean like all flowing into her. Literally all the mist on the planet is being drawn into her, which is an incredible visual when we cut to other characters and they look outside and see, what's the mist doing? Why is it going over there? Like, it's going there really fast. Oh my god. She's able to kill 13 Inquisitors. Oh my god, those guys are strong. But she isn't able to kill Marsh. That's because before she could, she sucked up the last of the mist and disappeared. She became a god. The previous Preservation was said to have died within the Hero of Ages, like bro's body plopped onto the ground. And because of that, Vin was able to become Preservation itself, which is insane. Oh my god, I wasn't expecting that, Mr. Sanderson. Then a bunch of things are happening all at once, and now is the time when the Sanderlanche is coming in full force. Probably started when Vin was having the sick-ass Dragon Ball fight, but now you're really feeling it. I needed a second day for filming. Sazed finds out that the Lord Ruler's atium stash is with the Khandra, and the atiums is actually a part of the god Ruin's body. Ruin is trying to find the atium stash so he can just absorb it into himself and achieve full power. Meanwhile with Elend, we find out that the mist that throughout this entire book was actually making people fall ill was actually just turning people into Allomancers, even though it killed a few people. This is because to gain powers within the Cosmere, you have to snap. Also known as you have to go through the shit. Like you have to meet death and be beaten into an inch of your life basically in order to snap. Then through Vin's godly influence, Elend is able to lead his army, or at least the part of it that can burn atium, to the Khandra homeland before the god Ruin can, and bring his entire Koloss army to take the atium stash. Then everything is coming to a head in this final fight. Since Elend took all the soldiers that are able to burn only atium, the atium mistings, they're able to fight off the Koloss until there's no atium left. I mean, they weren't going to win against the Koloss, but they did win against Ruin because they burned all of the atium that was in the Khandra homeland stash, and there's no atium left anymore. And Ruin's Koloss can't get to it, and Ruin can't achieve his full power. And then, my boy Elend, he's straight up beheaded. You know, I had a feeling he was probably going to die, but oh my god, beheading? Ugh. My boy got Ned Starked. So, with Ruin unable to achieve his full power, Vin is able to just destroy Ruin, throw her entire godly self at him, and just take him down with her. Preservation usually can't destroy, but since Vin, as a human, is a creation of both Preservation and Ruin, she's able to destroy Ruin at the cost of her own life. So that's our main two characters dead. It's, of course, a bit of a tragic way to go out, but it's more of a noble sacrifice, if anything. Some people may be like, oh my god, my poor Vin and Elend. But reading it, I was just like, damn, oh my god, that happened? Their deaths fall into the very Christian elements that are very present throughout the entire book of self-sacrifice, but I'll get to those later. So, they're dead. Sazed walks out of the Khandra homeland into the blazing heat of the planet, since Vin plugged the ash mounts earlier, so ash has stopped flying down to cool the land. And he finds the bodies of Vin, Elend, and what Ruin used to be, which is like some redhead, I guess. Sazed finds two very different tendrils coming out of Vin and Ruin, of mist and smoke, respectively, that he can just grab onto. This is where the most insane thing happens, and where the Hero of Ages title actually comes in. You know, I wasn't expecting it to resolve like that, but I think it was great. It was a great way to resolve it. So the real Hero of Ages is Sazed. He takes the godly powers of both Ruin and Preservation into himself, and at the same time taps into all the knowledge of the Keepers that his order had stored over the long years. This grants him the knowledge to actually use the power, but not mess things up like the Lord Ruler did. And because Sazed has the powers of both Preservation and Ruin, he's able to actually create instead of just preserve like the Lord Ruler did. All of his religions did mean something. It's not that there was just one true one, but that each religion held some truth about the world. Like one religion allows him to figure out where he needs to put the planet back in. Another one figures out, they like plants a lot, so he knows how to make plants. Sazed becomes God. Like, he literally becomes God. Now the world has been fixed, and there's green plants and grass and flowers. Everything isn't brown and misty anymore. Sazed, in his godly form, was actually the one that wrote all the epigraphs within the Hero of Ages. I mean, I had already come to that conclusion at some point in the book, like maybe like 30% of the way, but I kind of forgot that it started with, I am, unfortunately, the Hero of Ages. Oops! I also wasn't expecting him to become God, but you know. So now I have a lot of questions. So yes, the epigraphs were actually a tome that Spook picked up in the epilogue of the book that Sazed had written. Did he just will it into existence? I mean, I understand that he can probably just do that. I mean, he's God now. But I think it's very funny that he just gives them a book to read. In that book, he says that he was able to restore the bodies of Vin and Elend, but he wasn't able to bring their souls back to their bodies. But he says that Vin and Elend were like totally cool with being dead. So I guess that confirms that there is an afterlife? What's going to happen in future books? Are they just gonna accept that there's an afterlife? Like, they're straight up an afterlife. That's pretty interesting, Brando Sando. I wonder how you're gonna pull it off. Also, Kelsier, the guy who has been dead for a while, told Sazed to make Spook a Mistborn because, I don't know, he thought it'd be funny. Like, yeah, the boy deserves to be a Mistborn after all this shit. So people who have died, like, a while back still have their souls just floating around somewhere. Is Spook just gonna go around saying, like, hey, guys, there is a god, just so you know, and he's a bud of mine. Don't worry, you'll be fine. One unfortunate thing is that there's no mist anymore. Like, I get it, but it's also in the title of the series. The vibes will certainly be less cool whenever I get around to reading Era 2. Like, what am I reading? There's Mistborn with no mist? What? Am I just reading Born now? Finally, I think it's funny that Sazed basically just says, hey, so, Spook, there are 2 more medals. You can just go find them yourself. It'll be fun for you to find them. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but you can just go find them for yourself. Like, Sanderson didn't know what those last 2 medals were and just decided to think about them later. Which, if I remember correctly, was actually the case. And that's the Hero of Ages. But now it's time for the section of the video where I talk about a bunch of random stuff that I don't know how to fit very well into the rest of the video. Yay! First, we have to talk about Christianity. This book certainly takes a lot of symbolism from Christianity, but not to the point where it's outright allegory. This isn't some Pilgrim's Progress bullshit, alright? Like, obviously, the Church of the Survivor is very clearly modeled on Christianity. Kelsier is very obviously a Jesus figure. He was a martyr that died under an oppressive government and as such was elevated to divinity by the people. Does that make the Lord Ruler the Roman Empire? The symbol that Kelsier and the Church of the Survivor are associated with is the spear. The thing that killed Kelsier, much like the cross is associated with Jesus, and that's the symbol of the Christian church. You know, the thing Jesus was killed on and crucified on. Spook becomes a survivor of flame, much like the Christians that were persecuted and executed by the Romans after Jesus Christ's death. What does that make Vin, like, the Virgin Mary? Imagine Jesus' mom killed Pontius Pilate. Moving right along, on page 660, it says that all that was left of Preservation's mind was a shadow of self. This is interesting because the second book of the Era 2 trilogy is called Shadows of Self. Now, I don't know how relevant the connection between them will be, but it's a connection nonetheless. Maybe in his godhood, Sazed will become a shadow of his former self and become something else entirely? I don't really know. Also, it said that the Hero of Ages was referred to with gender-neutral pronouns because they didn't really know. It could be like a man or a woman, but in actuality, I guess it's both Ruin and Preservation, like the masculine and the feminine? Or does it mean that since Sazed is a eunuch, he's not really man or woman? It's kind of weird, right? I feel like that's a little weird. Anyway, some of the phrases in this book can be really goofy. Like, sometimes I'll be reading it, and the MCU connection to the Cosmere just gets very clear. It's like I'm reading a Marvel movie sometimes. Like, I swear, characters are low-key saying one-liners at some points. There's just a weird vibe to the dialogue sometimes throughout the novel. Wahoo! An example of this is what Elend says to Vin in chapter 28 on page 239 of my copy. You know, Elend added, during those days when you refused to marry me, I constantly thought about how strange you were. She raised an eyebrow. Well, that's romantic. Elend smiled. Oh, come on. You have to admit that you're unusual, Vin. You're like some strange mixture of a noblewoman, a street urchin, and a cat. Plus, you've managed, in our short 3 years together, to kill not only my god, but my father, my brother, and my fiancé. That's kinda like a homicidal hat trick. It's a strange foundation for a relationship, wouldn't you say? Vin just rolled her eyes. For one thing, I think it's really funny. Like, yes, that's true. But it's also really funny how Elend is just pointing out how absurd it is. What's really weird, though, is the term homicidal hat trick. It feels so modern and kinda out of place because when I think of hat trick, it's usually used in the context of, like, soccer when a player, like, scores 3 goals in a row. Like, who is Vin supposed to be? Lionel Messi? Now let's talk about theme. The biggest theme Brandon Sanderson really hammers in on in The Hero of Ages is trust. Everywhere in this book. There's the trust that's inherent to relationships between people, like Vin and Elend is a great example. Such as Vin trusting Elend won't attack Fadrak City while she's in it and the Colossus are attacking. And also Elend trusting Vin to have a plan when she's going off in the middle of, like, the Colossus attacking or whatever, to, like, actually know what she's doing when she's just flying off in a horseshoe whirlwind. There's also trust being broken that led to the entire conflict of this book, that being the trust that was broken between Ruin and Preservation. Preservation broke Ruin's trust when he broke the deal that they made together. The place where the Lord Ruler's ATM stash is within the Kandra homeland is just straight up called the Trust Warren. Trust is literally in the name. The Lord Ruler trusted his companions that he'd turned into Kandra enough to keep his ATM stash there so he could fight against Ruin and keep it away from him. I think the deal between them might just even straight up be called the Trust. Trust, likewise, is deeply connected to faith within this novel. Faith is a sort of trust, after all. The trust that someone or something out there is actually looking out for you. And you trust that thing that there's actually a reason for all this bullshit to be happening. That's what Sazed struggled with throughout the entire novel, after all, when he was just depressed as hell. He lost that trust, but then decided to trust that Vin would be the one to make everything right. And then, once Vin, you know, died, he chose to trust the terrorist prophecies were true and then become God himself. Become the person that will be looking out for everyone. And also, like, the word trust just keeps popping up in The Hero of Ages. Like, Vin's like, Elend, you gotta trust me. Or Spook's like, don't worry, You gotta trust me. I got a plan for this, alright? Like, everyone is asking people to trust in them. We're just talking about... Trust just comes up a lot, right? It's almost to the point where it gets annoying, but I think it's more the fact that it's noticeable. Like, I get it, Brandon Sanderson. The theme is trust. You don't need to keep saying trust within the novel this much. But I believe that's all I wanted to say about the Hero of Ages. I'm going to give this novel and the entire Mistborn Era 1 trilogy 2 thumbs up. This is a trilogy I can easily recommend to anyone, even if they're not big readers of fantasy novels. Heck, even if they're not big readers in general, they're probably gonna like the Mistborn trilogy. Even if they just read the first Mistborn book, they should get to the Hero of Ages and the Well of Ascension, but even if they just read the first Mistborn book, they're probably gonna like it. Especially if people want to get into modern fantasy literature, this trilogy is a really great choice. And this final book in the trilogy is a great conclusion that still opens up doors for the Mistborn world to be explored later down the line. Of course, I recommend reading the first Mistborn book, Mistborn: The Final Empire, and the Well of Ascension before reading the Hero of Ages, but if you're an insane person and want to read just the summaries in the back of the Hero of Ages, I guess you can? But that's going to be it for today's episode of One Man's Book Trash. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the Hero of Ages in the comments down below, and while you're down there, like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to support the channel a little bit more and be entertained while you're at it, you can go ahead and buy my fantasy heist novel based on the tarot, The Magician's Rule, available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and hardcover editions. If you like Mistborn, let's just say you just might like this book. But anyway, I've got a lot of secondhand books to get into, and also some ideas for other book-related videos in the future. So join me next time on One Man's Book Trash as we talk about Curb Your Enthusiasm, the book by Deidre Dolan, a truly insane book to follow up the Hero of Ages. I'll see you there. Bye!